Welcome to the show. I'm Isha. Here in the studio, we have Rachell. Welcome, Rachell.
Thank you.
Rachell is here to share with us on diversity.
So today I just wanted to talk a little bit more about my history with my understanding of what diversity means to me. I grew up in Randolph, Massachusetts. Randolph is one of the most diverse communities in the Commonwealth. One thing that I really enjoyed about growing up was noticing that my friend group represented people from all over the world. Necessarily, I noticed that I was surrounded by so much support from my friends who just didn't look like me, but respected my values, respected my time. They wanted to know me, they wanted to know my culture, and I also took time to invest in theirs. I remember having a friend from Nigeria who spoke to me about her customs and her ideals. I had friends who were Asian, Vietnamese, Hispanic, and growing up, this was a cultural norm for me, understanding that I was surrounded by so much diversity of itself made me respect it even more. So as I got older, this was something that I continued to notice, that I wanted to be in more spaces that reflected a diverse set of people. And I wasn't necessarily comfortable within spaces that only represented one person or one type of person or one group of people. And so I always strive to look for these type of spaces. As I got older, I went to a high school that did not represent too much diversity, and I found myself standing out in a way that was different for me. I remember actually being asked a lot of questions about my background, and I was a little hesitant of how to really approach, how to integrate into these spaces. And moving forward, I had to learn how to embrace who I was, not only as a woman, but as a woman of color, and what I actually bring to the table, which then allowed me to express myself fully and to be my authentic self. Now, this did take some time, and the friend groups that I was around at the time did have to break down their own barriers and had to break down their own biases as well as myself in order to create lasting relationships to this day. So I am grateful to have that aspect of growing up in a diverse community, as well as going into a different community with almost a makeup of just one set of people, and then being able to break through those barriers as well.
So diversity is very important to you. Do you think all the discussions that we are having today everywhere in the corporate, everywhere in the boards about diversity, does that match your expectations?
I believe that we're getting to a place that we need to be, but there's still a lot of work that needs to be done. I'm noticing within corporations that they're speaking more about the diversity label of we want to be more diverse and we want to make sure our workforce reflects people from different generations and different races. But that's not always the case in every corporation. And I think that's a stress onto these businesses that have actually statistically shown that they do better if they have that diversity aspect. So it's again asking the questions of why aren't certain groups being included in these organizations? What is the holdup? And if we're living in a culture in a time where we're representing so many different countries around the world in one space, why are we not supporting these people? I think that just really goes back to the questions of management. Are we hiring the right people? Are we hiring people that can fit these positions, that adequately reflect our environments? I think these are the questions that we have to continue to ask. But I most definitely think that we're on our way. And I say on our way because there are groups that are supporting diversity, and there are organizations who are hiring liaisons and establishing support groups, as well as encouraging even just people of color or minorities just to step up, and they're giving them opportunities. And so I salute those organizations and those businesses that are really stepping out of that comfort zone and not really staying back within a way of we're just going to keep this organization the way it is because we're comfortable. Instead, we're going to embrace a new idea in order to get a new outcome. So I'm most definitely looking forward to what's going to happen within the next couple of years to see how this expands.
Right on track. And so diversity in colleges, in schools, in corporations, in government,
Right.
Is a way to include everyone. So inclusion is very important to understand people's view, thought, culture. A lot of talks going on. Everyone wants to hire diversity, but
Right.
are they doing so, or is just everyone labeling diversity to be on the good side of citizens?
I believe that that's a really big question because there's a lot of levels, and I think that people will abuse the word, people will adopt the word. People will support diversity, some people will ignore diversity, might write it off as if they're doing it, but they're not implementing diversity. I think that, again, I look, at least within my own community, I don't see too many African Americans or Hispanics occupying higher positions in government, in organizations, corporations, in education even. And I wonder if we are a demographic that especially is exceeding and receiving degrees at a higher rate than others, and why are we almost not being able to occupy these spaces? So again, these are the questions that need to continue to be asked. I do think that we're in the right route. It's just a matter of making sure that these policies are being implemented within different organizations, and where is government to say, hey, where is your diversity? What have you guys changed in order to create a healthy environment that actually supports cultural diversity within your corporation, and then think about those things and develop better strategies if they're not doing that, and actually highlighting those corporations or businesses that are doing that. There is a difference, and I think that, again, we kind of get into we're working for ourselves, where it's the American dream type of thinking, but that's not going to help our society. It's only going to help a certain amount of people. So something to develop.
As a woman of color, I so understand what Rachell is trying to convey to our audience, but I would like to know more from a young professional as how times have changed between my generation and Rachell's generation. Is time changing? Has it changed? As she said, we are no longer invisible, I understand, but even if we are visible, to what extent are we visible?
I think that as I'm going into a workforce that is, again, trying to stress that diversity aspect, I think that there is more change that needs to be done. I believe that there are patterns in certain organizations that are just kind of going with the motions instead of implementing the right strategies. And then there's others that are spearheading. And we're not really necessarily learning from each other, so I do worry about that. At the same time, if I'm looking for an organization to be part of, these are the things I'm looking for. I'm looking for a team that is diverse. I'm looking for a team that is able to collaborate and brainstorm and thinking about that change that's necessarily not only going to hit their missions, but is going to support their workers. And if I do not feel supported in a space, that's not going to help me grow. So just like anyone, I would not stay there. That if it's not going to help me or promote who I am or accept who I am, these are things I have to consider as a person of color. When I am looking for an organization, how do you support people of color? How do you support minorities, women, people with disabilities? There's so many levels to just accepting diversity. And I know that more businesses, corporations have to think about these things as they're continuing to develop.
My biggest question is, like we had a discussion, what is it to be growing up diverse? Like you wake up in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
That's a good question to ask. That everyone takes for granted.
Right.
What it would be that when we grow up, like when children grow up and you're diverse, how does the world treat you? Would you have some thoughts on that?
That's a really good question. I take it as that middle class African American woman who, went to school. And again, I come from an area that is diverse. Boston is pretty diverse, and we're noticing that we have a shift of just who's represented here. So when I'm walking down the street, I don't necessarily feel like I'm being judged. Again, it could be because of the area that I am. I feel comfortable, going up to people. But there are those times that sometimes I might feel that I put people on pedestals, maybe because of their position, or maybe because I feel like they have privilege. And these are things that I personally have to remember that don't have weight at the end of the day. I know that I am trying my best and striving and developing myself as a woman, just like anybody else, just like any man, just like any other woman. And so I try to remember that we're all in this together, that no one is ahead of the other person, and to kind of take away that insecurity and replace it with motivation and positive thoughts in order to get through my day. But in this area, I will say that I do feel comfortable when I'm in different spaces for the most part, but I just always have to remember that there is going to be some type of label that might be dropped on me, and I just have to remember how to respond to those labels. And that's not to give in and not to let people place them on me and think that they are permanent. That's not the case. It's more about really being my own person and to be, again, that authentic self that I'm striving to be at the end of the day.
It feels very fulfilling to talk to Rachell because she's a girl of confidence. So one of the reasons I wanted always Rachell to bring out these discussions where there were many more who are not confident as you are. And by talking, I'm so glad that we could at least talk on diversity earlier. We wouldn't be able to bring this up on any platform. But today we have the liberty, the freedom to bring it up and speak about it so that we can all solve this issue. And you speaking on diversity tells us that generations after generation, I'm sure there's a 10-year-old who is looking up and said, well, I can do that. I don't know what diversity is. We're looking for that day to come.
Right.
So that now here in Massachusetts, we are working on that. So different parts of America, we would like to include diversity. What are your other thoughts, do you think, on diversity?
Well, speaking to that 10-year-old, it's most definitely going to be a whole shift where your views will go as you grow up. Because when we look at the world, we're always changing, and systems will change, and even the trends will change. But it's really important just to know who you are as a person and never let anybody distract you away from that, because it's so interesting how people can just be shifted quickly just because of the words or because of what's happening in the world. But we have to remember who we are deeply in order to be effective. So I tell that 10-year-old to be yourself and to be who you are. I tell that 15-year-old, that 20-year-old, that 25-year-old who could be looking to do something new, who's looking to really establish themselves in the world, to continue to actively seek to be themselves at the end of the day, away from that, and to find groups that might not necessarily look like you, but who would embrace you. Find the right people who are here for you. Those are the things that I would tell that 10-year-old.
Even as a diverse woman, you are completely from this country. You speak the language, you understand the people, you do everything that you've studied, you've educated yourself, you reflect the goodness of society. When you walk into a workplace, what is it that you notice that makes you feel you're a woman of color?
One thing I notice again is I always can understand what demographic is represented, and I look to those things. I look to see what are the age ranges, what are the races that are represented, women opposed to men. I think about these certain things, and I think that everybody has it on the back of their minds. Who are they working with? What is my environment looking like? And so that's one thing that comes to mind when it comes to diversity, is who is in my circle? Who am I surrounded by? And then I can understand who am I most definitely connected to when it comes to my job, and who I have to continue to invest in and connect with as well.
Do you feel discriminated when you're not in a diverse, even today, at this era? Do you feel discriminated when you walk into a gathering of not diverse people, or not with the same age group?
I would say sometimes if that group, it does not represent a diverse setting, then I don't feel as comfortable. There could be different reasons why. It could be how it was advertised, how it was promoted for, who knows who. Again, I just don't feel like those spaces are always going to be as constructive if they're only representing one group of people, especially if those groups or settings are trying to bring together people from areas and trying to, support or inform. I believe that everybody has to be at the table in some type of capacity. So if we're only talking to one group of people who are from one set area, we're missing a whole range of other people who could be benefiting from that conversation.
Very inspirational, because you bring into the reality of diversity. And I myself know that being a woman of color, I'm also not from this country, being an immigrant, it's even tougher because you have to work that much harder to let the people acknowledge you. I would like to see that day that you don't have to please someone because you're from another country, or you are a woman of color, or you are of different demographic. You should be very comfortable in your own skin, in the way you look, the way you eat, the way you talk. I love that day to happen. So tell me more about diversity. I'd love to know.
I like that point about us coming into our own. And I believe that we're being more celebrated, especially like women who are stepping out and being bold and colorful and embracing their culture and embracing who they are, maybe their sexual orientation, maybe their faith. So it's most definitely been great because there's so many different platforms. Social media has so many abilities to show just a different walk of life, and somebody just fully embracing that. I love to see positive posts of people who are just, embracing that cultural aspect, saying that we are here, even in the face of adversity, where a country, even maybe not in America, could be struggling, but they're still holding up their flag. They're still having pride. So, and then even support coming from their family members or people from their nation in America. So it's amazing to see how transparent things are getting. Again, we need to work in this area of just like accepting other people, accepting when you notice somebody down the street and they might not look like you, and they might be saying something different, but they have their rights. They are still a human. There are things that I see every day and I don't agree with it, but does that mean I'm going to shoot it down? Does that mean I'm going to disregard it? No, because I wouldn't want somebody to do that to me if I'm out here saying something that I believe in and that I'm passionate about. You have to allow people to be passionate about something. We're all here for a reason, and we're all trying to develop. So I most definitely want to promote and celebrate other people who are standing up for things that they care about, as long as it's safe.
Absolutely. And I think humanizing all of this is also very important. One, I do agree with the rights, because rights are very important. This is something makes this country so special. But I also believe that we should be more human to treat each other. Just when we treat each other with humanity, then we can say that we don't discriminate. And discrimination brings this is why discrimination is related to diversity, because only when we see something that's doesn't look like the same, then you start discriminating. Well, I don't know, I don't need to know, I don't know who they are. So, but since your school years to your professional years, you have seen the progress of diversity, correct?
Yes, I've seen a lot of support and even being part of different groups. And when I was in undergrad, Haitian support groups, I was part of a sorority that is a multicultural sorority. So we celebrate just different cultures coming together. And some people don't know about these things and know about these groups that are actively fighting to promote diversity. And just to keep that, because think about our culture, think about how everything keeps on shifting. If we don't preserve these things 10, 20, 50 years down the road, people are not going to be talking about the same because we are not passing it down. We are not being authentic about who we are. And we all have a line of lineage. And we can think about the ways that our ancestors or maybe our grandfathers or grandmothers or just those around us have impacted us in some type of way. So if we're not sharing that and being authentic about it, then it's lost. And that's one thing about diversity and that I appreciate, when I can learn something about the next person to the right of me and the left of me. And again, it's not something that I know about, so it's something that I have to take in and I have to accept it, and just try my best to understand where that person came from. Sometimes it's something positive, sometimes it's something negative. Again, it's just I want to be in that position where I can just absorb from the people around us. I think we have to be more like that as a society, of just taking in and learning more around diversity as a whole.
So when you go to watch movies, you're happy to see some diverse actors, right? Because they have to work that much harder to put themselves on the screen so that we all appreciate that there is someone representing us. What are your thoughts when you go to watch movies? Do you see that kind of, does it inspire you?
Right, yes, I most definitely go support those films. I am in love with a lot of the actors and actresses who are stepping up and they're actually getting those lead roles in films. And I'm very proud of those people in Hollywood that are actually getting that chance to shine as they should. And even the directors who are of color, I'm very proud of them too. I think that this is, again, an ability just to show the creative aspect of people of color and minorities, and to think about what can be done and what kind of glasses can be shattered, just because there is so much creativity within just people, not just, again, a set of people. And when we really look at it, these films or media, when we look at TV, when we look at more Black families, when we look at Hispanic families, where there's still demographics that are being missed. So why aren't we showing those families? Why aren't we showing those people? And I would love to be, to be able to see that on my TV. I flip channels, or I go to a different network and I see a different person being highlighted, or I see more culturally conscious TV being shown. That would be amazing.
So that makes you comfortable. Why I mentioned on movies is, yes, we understand corporates, yes, we understand government, but I think young professionals, or any one of them, always look at the television for anything. They're flipping through social media, they're flipping through channels, and when they see women of color, men of color, that they get inspired and they feel, well, I'm not anything different. So I think that has a huge impact, according to my knowledge. So I wanted to ask you if that's the case with your generation or generations below that.
All right, representation is everything nowadays, and I think we don't understand it until we're older, and we can then look back and say, it was that figure in my life who looked like me, who I could see, on a bigger screen, that made me feel that I can be that person. And even for me, growing up, there were role models who I was around who were just leaders, and that made me already acknowledge that I can be that. So the representation is essential, especially like when it comes to employment, when it comes to vision, when it comes to motivations in life. If you don't have that example, where is your foundation? And so that is something to consider, because where are people kind of drawing their vision from? You know, it's really hard. There are those trailblazers who can, you know, see an area that hasn't been occupied and will work hard, but not everybody has that motivation. So just have that influence is very important. And even as I continue on with my work, and I want to continue to help, especially with the diversity agenda, I really want to make sure that representation comes first. I do a lot of what I do because I don't see a lot of young women my age doing this work, but there are people who are under me who might be people of color or Hispanic or Asian, white, and they see a black woman stepping up and doing something in their community or in their workspace. And they need to see that. They need to see that it is capable, it is able, and then that will gear them up and do the same. That's my hope, that they'll have that same motivation to be impactful within their areas as well.
May your hope come true. I strongly wish little things like when you walk into a beauty store, when you try to match a foundation, when you try to, well, right there you also have diversity. I did walk into a store and I was looking for different foundations, this little thing, but there was no one who was a person of color to be a salesperson. So I was just wondering, how is this possible that you have a beauty store, you have hired people, and there is not one or two diverse candidates who understand how the foundation matches or how the makeup should match. It's small thoughts, little thoughts, but that's when I realized a lot needs to be changed. I mean, we are talking, most of the corporates are talking on board and hiring, but little things, you know, needs to change.
Right. Again, that's a fair point. There's just so many areas that we can work on. I look at it that, you know, women of color, people of color, really can have more opportunities, especially within workspaces. But again, I don't think we're being supported, and that is something I deeply feel, because I notice even just like representation again, that people are not being as supported as they should be. There's not enough training. There's not enough you know, supports that are going to certain groups of people. And again, it really goes right back to management and how we're hiring and how we're supporting all our workers. And this, again, sometimes doesn't even go with color. It just goes amongst people, that there isn't that right training that is implemented within workspaces to support individuals in order to see them succeed and to be effective. Now, even if you looked at maybe that saleswoman, if she had the right training, if she had the right supports within her workspace, perhaps she could have been more effective. And then maybe another thing too, people of color or even diverse settings, it's just sometimes we're not given all those opportunities up front as quickly, or not talked about promotion. So these are just different areas to consider. It's different for each industry.
I never thought on this aspect. It's amazing. So you do think that there should be a training. I mean, there is, but not to the diverse community who can talk about what kind of training. Can you emphasize a little bit more on that?
Yes, I believe that when coming into a organization or corporation, we should be talking about goal setting. We should talk about the cultural environment, more so about the expectations of the role, but then developing on that. I think that far too many jobs kind of just need people to fill in spaces, but are not as concerned as to where that person is going to end up 5-10 years down the road, unless if they see something that's special or, you know, ahead of the game in that person. And I think these are things to consider. Why aren't we just helping everybody within their perspective areas? Sometimes we look at industries that don't have enough money, so they don't have enough resources to train up these individuals, and then we ask, so why is training put to the side when it could be so instrumental to a person's development within a role? So that's what really comes to mind when I think about just the initial onboarding process at any establishment for anyone.
So it's not only diversity, you mean to say that onboarding process for a woman, of course women of color is even difficult, but for a woman is something that needs to be looked into to inspire or to set goals.
Yes.
Wow. So it's not only just diversity, well, diversity can be of different forms then.
Correct. Yeah, most definitely could be, you know, away from cultural, we could be looking at it at a lens of just like points of views.
Amazing.
Right.
I never thought of it. I always thought diversity, the first thing comes to your mind is women of color, men of color, but not so. It can be woman, it can be man, it can be any other genders. There we have diversity. It can be what's your environment, where you come from. And so it's a lot to be spoken on. And so here in Boston, yes, we have freedom to voice our opinion. Now we want these thoughts to be included, to make, so that's where comes diversity and inclusion, what the whole world's talking about. What is your thought on that you want to share with viewers? Like you said, the 10-year-old is a dream to see that this 10-year-old will grow up comfortable and strong enough to never think what color, what race, what culture they are, whether white, whether black, whether Hispanic, whether Asian, anyone. Share some thoughts, please.
I think diversity and inclusion is, again, a very big topic that we as people have to consider every day. When we walk out, we notice that there's going to be people who don't look like us. And again, it's not an opportunity to run away from, it's more of an opportunity to embrace and to really learn from other people and their perspectives. And then it's getting away from just the society's look off of, you know, being away from other people who don't look like you. Instead, it's just being strong within your ways of thinking and to step out of the box and to just embrace other people around you, embrace new ideas, embrace new concepts, ask more questions that are not offensive, but questions that are going to invite that conversation and about, you know, where do you come from? What do you think about this issue? How does this affect your family? I heard that this is happening. How can I be effective? How can I support you? I don't think that we're having those constructive conversations enough. I most definitely can see nowadays people of different races coming together and having sit-downs and conversations, which I'm fully in support of. And again, so what's going to happen during those conversations and after those conversations are essential. So as the inclusion part comes into it, again, how are we supporting just not only people of color, Asian community, Hispanic community, whites, and like how are we going to bring everybody together so that we can live in harmony? And you see communities that reflect this, but again, they're not living in harmony together. They might live near each other, but they don't know each other. So the question is, how do we create inclusion and how do we support it? If it's there, what's working? And again, I don't think we talk about the positives enough. We're not talking about the programs. We're not talking about the centers. We're not talking about the liaisons or the mentors who are endlessly trying to support these efforts to create a more inclusive world. But as we continue to develop and change as a nation, these are things that we greatly have to consider. And I support and stand behind any organization or person who is fighting or advocating for the rights of people as well as inclusion efforts.
Thank you for your wonderful thought. It really brought in a lot that we don't speak about, you know. All I can say is I do support diversity, and I really request everyone to not abuse the word diversity just because there's something to talk about diversity. Diversity has a very deep meaning, and we want to bring up the youngsters being confident in this world. Thank you, Rachell.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining us again. Have a wonderful evening. I'm Isha.
I'm Rachell.